If you have a straight ramp, which is leading up to the Great Pyramid, if it's going to carry blocks right up to what will be the top of the Great Pyramid, no gang of workers can haul a 20-ton block.
Do you think the pyramids were built by Egyptians with ropes, ramps, and manpower?
I think we're looking again at a lost technology, and it was this ancient apocalypse 12,800 years ago that wiped that.
That's what textbooks and every tour guide will tell you. But Graham Hancock, who has spent decades collecting facts, has challenged this version of history. He has gone on the record to say the Great Pyramid might be far older than we've been told, and possibly built by a civilization lost to time. His findings have sparked debates, drawn criticism, and forced a serious conversation about what we really know and what we don't. What are these facts, and why is there so much chaos about it? There's only one way to find out. Stay tuned. Graham Hancock's shocking pyramid theory. Unlike what you might think, Graham Hancock is not even a trained archaeologist, and he's never claimed to be one. He's a journalist by profession. He was a former correspondent for The Economist, who gradually shifted his focus from mainstream reporting to something far more controversial, that ancient history that doesn't quite add up. Over the last 3 decades, Hancock has traveled extensively, researching some of the world's oldest and most mysterious sites. From South America to Southeast Asia, from Turkey to Egypt, Hancock made it his mission to question history. When he sees physical structures, alignments, or patterns that mainstream archaeology struggles to explain, he starts asking questions, and not everyone likes those questions. In 1995, Hancock published Fingerprints of the Gods. It was a book that first made his name a topic of serious and often heated debate. It became a global bestseller, translated into dozens of languages, and brought a mainstream spotlight to theories that had long been dismissed or ignored. In that book, he questioned the accepted timeline of ancient civilizations. He equally suggested that there might have been a highly advanced culture lost to history, and it was one that predated everything we've been taught about the origins of human civilization. And one of the main locations he focused on was Egypt. The Egyptian pyramids, especially the Great Pyramid of Giza, became central to Hancock's investigations. He spent years studying their dimensions, alignments, materials, and the context in which they were supposedly built. He pored over old excavation records, consulted with engineers and geologists, and walked the sites himself, not once, but many times. What he kept finding didn't sit comfortably with the mainstream view. And it wasn't just speculation. Hancock built his arguments around observable data like erosion patterns, astronomical alignments, and architectural precision. He also cross-referenced those findings with geological studies and ancient records. Unlike fringe theorists, he presented his work in a way that was grounded in real-world evidence, which is part of why his work has become so hard to ignore. Critics often disagree with his conclusions, but even they admit that the questions he raises are valid and deserve attention. He's also not operating in isolation. Over the years, Hancock has collaborated with or cited experts in geology, astronomy, architecture, and ancient texts. In particular, his partnership with geologist Dr. Robert Schoch helped bring mainstream scientific attention to erosion patterns on the Sphinx, which challenged accepted dating of the monument. This opened a doorway to new discussions about the actual age of Egypt's most iconic structures. Today, with the release of his Netflix series Ancient Apocalypse, Hancock has introduced his investigations to a whole new generation. And of course, this has reignited old debates in the process. But none of this compares to what he uncovered about the pyramids themselves. Because deep inside his years of research, there's one discovery that's backed by observable data. This very one challenges everything we thought we knew about who built them, and when and how they came to be. This is one intriguing ride you don't want to miss. The claim. Graham Hancock believed we had been misled about one of the most iconic structures on Earth, the Great Pyramid of Giza. According to mainstream Egyptology, it was built around 2500 BC by Pharaoh Khufu, using copper tools and thousands of laborers. Hancock challenged this timeline and the builder entirely. In multiple interviews, books, and documentaries, he said the pyramids weren't built by the ancient Egyptians as we knew them, but inherited from a much earlier, lost civilization. This one advanced knowledge of engineering, astronomy, and architecture. In Fingerprints of the Gods, and more recently in his Netflix series Ancient Apocalypse, Hancock presented a consistent claim. These structures were far older than we had been taught. He pointed to geological data, astronomical alignments, and architectural precision as indicators that the Great Pyramid and the Sphinx might have dated back to around 10,500 BC, before the emergence of dynastic Egypt. His theory proposed that a catastrophic global event, likely a comet impact at the end of the last ice age, wiped out this lost civilization, but not before it passed down its knowledge to survivors who later influenced early cultures like the Egyptians, Sumerians, and Mayans. He didn't say aliens built the pyramids. Instead, he pointed out two hard-to-ignore anomalies that mainstream archaeology tended to overlook or dismiss. And he believed those anomalies pointed to a highly advanced human society that had existed long before history officially began. What makes these claims too hard to ignore? One of the central pieces of evidence Hancock leaned on was the Sphinx erosion theory, put forward by geologist Dr. Robert Schoch. In the early 1990s, Schoch examined the weathering patterns on the body of the Great Sphinx and concluded they were caused by long-term water erosion. Not wind and sand, as Egyptologists had long claimed. Egypt hadn't seen rainfall sufficient to cause that type of erosion since the end of the last ice age, over 7,000 years ago. Schoch's professional estimate? The Sphinx could have dated back as far as 10,000 BC, which pushed its construction thousands of years before the dynastic Egyptians even existed. Hancock adopted and publicized this finding, arguing that if the Sphinx was older than Egypt itself, so might the pyramids beside it. Next was the Orion correlation theory, proposed by Robert Bovell and heavily referenced by Hancock. The layout of the three pyramids at Giza matched the three stars in Orion's belt. While some argued this was a coincidence, Hancock noted that the alignment was too precise to ignore. Using astronomical software, researchers discovered that the only time this alignment perfectly matched the sky, including the offset of the smallest pyramid, was around 10,500 BC. This fits the same time frame as the Sphinx's possible erosion date, pointing again to a much older origin for the Giza complex. Then there was Göbekli Tepe in modern-day Turkey, arguably the strongest evidence for advanced pre-Egyptian civilizations. Discovered in the 1990s and excavated by German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt, Göbekli Tepe was a megalithic site dated to at least 9,600 BC. This is over 6,000 years older than the Great Pyramid. It featured 10 to 20-ton stone pillars, arranged in complex circular enclosures, with detailed carvings of animals and abstract symbols. No signs of agriculture, writing, or metal tools were found, meaning hunter-gatherers somehow managed to build the world's oldest known monumental architecture. Hancock argued that Göbekli Tepe proved a highly organized society existed before history officially began, and it might have been part of the same lost civilization responsible for the pyramids. He also questioned the construction methods behind the pyramids. According to the conventional view, ancient Egyptians used copper chisels, dolerite pounding stones, and wooden sledges to carve and move massive blocks of limestone and granite. But Hancock, after citing modern engineers and stonemasons, pointed out that copper was too soft to cut granite efficiently. Granite ranked about 6 to 7 on the Mohs hardness scale. Copper was just around 3. Without harder tools, it was unlikely that the perfectly flat, smooth, and angular granite blocks used inside the king's chamber could have been cut with such accuracy. Finally, Hancock emphasized the lack of physical evidence for the tools and techniques supposedly used to build the pyramids. Despite over a century of excavation, archaeologists never uncovered copper chisels, ramps, or pulleys in sufficient quantity or strength to justify the construction method claimed by mainstream Egyptology. In addition to that, the fact that the wheel wasn't even in use in Egypt when the pyramids were supposedly built raised more questions than answers. There were critical architectural details that remained unanswered to this day, even by Egyptologists. One of the most staggering was the precision of the blocks. The base of the Great Pyramid was almost perfectly level, within less than 1 inch across 13 acres. Some interior granite beams, like those in the king's chamber, were cut with such precision that engineers said modern equipment would have struggled to match the tolerance. These cuts were deliberate, consistent, and accurate. Then came the issue of weight and logistics. Some blocks used in the Great Pyramid, and especially in the nearby Valley Temple and Osirian, weighed up to 80 tons. These were quarried hundreds of miles away, in areas like Aswan. There were no written records showing how they were transported across the desert, moved up the Nile, and lifted into place with such exactness. Modern construction teams, using cranes and hydraulics, would have faced serious challenges doing the same today. Yet the ancient Egyptians were said to have done it with rope, manpower, and wooden sleds. Even more puzzling was that the pyramid-building timeline didn't follow normal human learning curves. Typically, in architecture or engineering, early projects were basic, and later ones improved over time. But in Egypt, the first major pyramid, the Great Pyramid, was the most advanced. Later pyramids were smaller, less precise, and in some cases, even collapsed. If the builders were learning, wouldn't the Great Pyramid have come later, after trial and error? Yet there was no prototype pyramid, no visible trial runs, no progression. It was as if they started with perfection, and then lost the knowledge. And perhaps the most frustrating for researchers like Hancock would have been the fact that there was no documentation. The ancient Egyptians documented nearly every aspect of their civilization in stone, ranging from wars, rituals, farming, astronomy, to family life. But for the building of their greatest monument, nothing. No blueprints, no artist depictions, no hieroglyphs that said, "We built this." The name Khufu appeared on one small beam in an upper chamber, but some experts believed that was added later. That was the entire basis for dating the pyramid to his reign. For Hancock, that wasn't nearly enough. Mainstream archaeology often responded to these questions with, "We haven't discovered the full picture yet." That may have been true. But Hancock argued that brushing off the inconsistencies only stalled real progress. His point wasn't that he knew everything. It was that we didn't. And in science, saying "we don't know" should have been the start of investigation, not the end of it. So in essence, according to Graham Hancock, we need to reconsider not just who built the pyramids, but when, how, and why they came to be. He believed these monuments were fingerprints left behind by a forgotten part of humanity, one we had only just started to uncover. But if you really want to understand Hancock's deeper theory, let's go back even further, to a global event many people have never heard of. Historical context. Regarding these pyramids, history takes us back to a catastrophic event called the Younger Dryas impact. This isn't fringe science. The Younger Dryas refers to a documented period of sudden global cooling that began roughly 12,018 years ago and lasted about 1,200 years. Many scientists agree this cooling event occurred, but the cause has been debated. A growing body of researchers, including the team behind the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis, believe that a comet, or fragments of a comet, struck Earth around that time. Geological layers containing high levels of platinum, microspherules, and melt glass found across North America and parts of Europe support this theory. The impact theory suggested widespread fires, climate disruption, and the extinction of many large animal species. It also might explain the sudden halt or regression in early human development across various parts of the world. For Hancock, this was the missing piece. He believed that this catastrophic event wiped out an advanced global civilization, not one with smartphones or space rockets, but a seafaring, megalithic building culture with deep knowledge of the stars, mathematics, and stonework. Hancock argued that this ancient civilization might have lived along coastlines, many of which are now submerged due to post-Ice Age sea level rise. When the Younger Dryas event occurred, it would have been devastating. Entire regions could have been flooded or destroyed. In Hancock's view, this explained why so little direct evidence remained. Survivors of the cataclysm spread inland and shared fragments of their knowledge with emerging societies. Those societies later developed into the cultures we now credit with the rise of civilization: Sumer, Egypt, the Indus Valley. The pyramids, he believed, were not inventions of the dynastic Egyptians, but inheritances, structures or knowledge passed down from that lost civilization. According to Hancock, ancient Egypt might have emerged as a kind of recovery culture, inheriting myths, tools, and templates from people who remembered the pre-cataclysmic world. In this sense, the Great Pyramid wasn't a beginning, but a leftover from a forgotten chapter of human history. Not a tomb, not a monument, but something that carried deeper purpose. Perhaps even a message, a marker, or a warning. He also drew connections to ancient myths and legends, particularly flood stories. Hancock pointed out that nearly every ancient culture had some form of flood myth. The Sumerians had Ziusudra, the Babylonians had Utnapishtim, the Hebrews had Noah, the Greeks had Deucalion, the Hindus had Manu. These weren't identical, but they shared a pattern. An advanced or chosen group was warned about an impending catastrophe and preserved knowledge or life. For Hancock, these weren't just metaphors. He believed they were distorted memories of real events, like a global disaster that nearly erased an entire chapter of human progress. Plato's story of Atlantis was another point Hancock often returned to. Written in 360 BC, Plato described Atlantis as an advanced maritime civilization that was destroyed by a natural disaster in a single day and night of misfortune. While mainstream scholars view the tale as allegory or philosophical fiction, Hancock saw it differently. He believed Plato might have been referencing an actual memory of this lost civilization, passed down through Egyptian priests to Greek philosophers. The timing, description, and sudden destruction of Atlantis, he argued, fit neatly with the Younger Dryas cataclysm. From Hancock's perspective, the Great Pyramid may have been a product of that ancient world, built before the cataclysm and preserved by later generations. If true, that would make it much older than the current estimate of around 4,500 years. It would also reframe how we view early human history. Instead of assuming a straight line from primitive tribes to modern civilization, Hancock's theory suggests a cycle: the rise, a fall, and a rebirth of human knowledge. In this interpretation, it isn't just about the pyramids. Other structures around the world, like the megaliths at Göbekli Tepe in Turkey or Nan Madol in Micronesia, could be remnants of this lost culture as well. Göbekli Tepe, for instance, has been dated to roughly 9,600 BC, already pushing the boundary of known human civilization. But the complexity of its design and the sophistication of the stonework suggest an intelligence beyond that of simple hunter-gatherers. Hancock argued that this wasn't an anomaly. It was evidence that ancient people were far more advanced than we had believed. He also emphasized the idea that we are missing parts of our history, not because the evidence is absent, but because we've been trained to ignore anything that doesn't fit a specific timeline. Hancock wasn't saying we had all the answers. He was saying we should be willing to ask harder questions. Looking deeply into this, what if Hancock was right? If Hancock's theory were even partly correct, it would mean that everything we know about early human history needs to be re-evaluated. First, the accepted timeline of technological development would be in question. Stone tools, small tribal settlements, and gradual progress would no longer be the only path. Instead, it would suggest that an earlier form of civilization existed with architectural, astronomical, and engineering knowledge far beyond what current models predict for that time. This also reframes the pyramids themselves. If the Great Pyramid and possibly others were built by a civilization predating Egypt, they might not be tombs at all. They might be messages encoded in geometry, measurements, and orientation. The idea that the pyramid's dimensions relate to Earth's curvature, that its alignment corresponds to cardinal directions with uncanny precision, and that it contains mathematical constants like pi and the golden ratio are all points that Hancock and others have used to argue the structure holds deeper meaning, and it could be a legacy for ancient science. Furthermore, it opens up the possibility that many more such sites remain undiscovered. If sea levels rose dramatically after the Ice Age, then countless ruins could lie underwater along ancient coastlines. Undersea scans off the coast of India, Cuba, and Japan have revealed what some researchers believe are man-made structures submerged under hundreds of feet of water. If verified, these would challenge existing historical narratives and support the idea that early civilization was more complex than believed. Rather than seeing modern civilization as the pinnacle of a slow and steady climb, we might begin to see it as a continuation. Or better still, even a rediscovery of something older. Hancock has often said that humanity is a species with amnesia. If the pyramids truly are relics of a forgotten era, then uncovering their true origin might help us recover not just lost knowledge, but a clearer understanding of our own identity and potential. These ideas are not universally accepted, and many mainstream scholars continue to criticize Hancock's interpretations. But whether right or wrong, his work has reignited public interest in ancient history, encouraged fresh examination of old evidence, and forced tough questions that traditional models haven't answered fully. And that alone has made his contribution significant. Even in skepticism, Hancock's theories have pushed the conversation forward. Academics are revisiting sites with new technology, questioning long-held assumptions, and considering timelines that once seemed impossible. In that sense, his influence extends beyond archaeology into the philosophy of science itself. What do we accept as knowledge? Who controls historical narratives? And what happens when new evidence challenges what we've long believed to be true? Hancock has raised these questions in a bid to call for a deeper inquiry into history. As intriguing as these ideas of Hancock may be, it has been faced with several criticisms and oppositions. The reasons for this will blow your mind. Oppositions and criticisms. Mainstream archaeology has never hesitated to push back against Graham Hancock's theories, especially those regarding the origins of the Egyptian pyramids and the idea of a lost advanced civilization. Prominent Egyptologists, archaeologists, and academic institutions have repeatedly labeled his claims as pseudoscientific, arguing that they rely heavily on speculation rather than hard, testable data. According to these scholars, there is no direct evidence that a technologically advanced society existed before known ancient civilizations like Mesopotamia, Egypt, or the Indus Valley. In their view, the pyramids are the culmination of thousands of years of architectural evolution, cultural development, and human labor. Not a leftover from an erased global society, like Hancock suggests. Critics argue that Hancock cherry-picks data that fits his narrative while ignoring or downplaying the well-established archaeological record. They point out that while the erosion patterns on the Sphinx, the alignment of the pyramids with Orion's belt, or the astronomical significance of ancient structures may be intriguing, they are not in themselves definitive proof of a pre-Egyptian advanced civilization. According to their assessment, these features can be explained within the scope of known history, existing engineering knowledge, and cultural beliefs at the time. Moreover, they emphasize that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and Hancock, they claim, simply has not delivered that level of proof. However, even within this criticism, there is a subtle acknowledgement that some aspects of Hancock's claims raise legitimate questions. While many archaeologists remain critical of his broader conclusions, few outright debunk the geological or astronomical observations. For instance, the erosion patterns on the Sphinx remain a subject of debate. Robert Schoch's theory of water erosion, which pushes the Sphinx's construction, dates back to thousands of years earlier than Egyptologists allow. This has not been conclusively disproven. Similarly, the pyramid's alignment with Orion's belt during 10,500 BC is an observable fact, even if the interpretations vary widely. Some experts have expressed that while they disagree with Hancock's conclusions, they support the idea that archaeology must remain open to challenge. This doesn't mean every alternative theory should be taken at face value, but rather that science progresses by questioning assumptions and re-examining data as new evidence or methods emerge. Several academics have also acknowledged that there are gaps in the historical record, especially regarding how the Great Pyramid was built. There are no records of its construction, nor how such precision was achieved with supposedly rudimentary tools. These gaps are often downplayed in public discourse, but they remain subjects of ongoing research. In this way, Hancock's theories have given way for a larger conversation about the nature of scientific inquiry itself. Should we dismiss theories that fall outside the mainstream just because they don't conform to current models? Or should we view them as opportunities to test the strength of what we think we know? These questions remain central to the debate over Hancock's work. While many experts continue to dispute his conclusions, they have also been forced to revisit some of their own assumptions under public scrutiny. That, in itself, is a sign of progress. When Graham Hancock's Ancient Apocalypse premiered on Netflix in November 2022, it instantly became one of the platform's most talked-about docuseries. Its 8-episode run introduced millions of viewers to Hancock's long-held theory that a forgotten, highly advanced civilization was wiped out by a global cataclysm roughly 12,000 years ago, and that remnants of its knowledge lived on in monuments like the pyramids. Whether viewers agreed or not, they were hooked. The show reached the top 10 in multiple countries and sparked massive online discussions, from Reddit threads and YouTube breakdowns to debates on history forums and TikTok explainer videos. For many people, it was the first time they had heard a version of human history that differed so radically from what they learned in school. The series prompted viewers to question traditional timelines, the role of mainstream archaeology, and even how knowledge itself is validated. One of the most significant effects of the show was how it resonated across generations. Younger audiences saw it as a fresh perspective that challenged the status quo. And the older viewers appreciated the way it gave voice to long-standing curiosities about the origins of ancient structures. Whether they believed Hancock's theory or not, people found themselves re-examining historical narratives they had previously taken for granted. The academic world, however, responded with intense backlash. Prominent archaeologists criticized the show's presentation, arguing that it misrepresented scientific consensus and created a false dichotomy between open-mindedness and academic dogma. The Society for American Archaeology even wrote to Netflix, urging the platform to add disclaimers clarifying that the series was not representative of mainstream archaeological understanding. But for every voice of academic criticism, there were dozens of online supporters defending the show's right to challenge traditional ideas. Podcasts across various genres, from science to pop culture, hosted long-form discussions dissecting the claims. Even major publications like the New York Times and The Guardian weighed in, highlighting the polarizing effect of Hancock's message. The global reaction revealed a deeper tension between the public's growing interest in alternative history and academia's effort to maintain standards of evidence and interpretation. While traditional scholars saw the show as misleading, many viewers saw it as empowering, an invitation to look beyond textbooks and trust their own curiosity. The debates became not just about pyramids and timelines, but about who gets to shape our understanding of the past. In classrooms, living rooms, and on social media, Hancock had opened a door that few could shut. And in doing so, he shifted the conversation. Not by proving everything he said was true, but by challenging the assumption that the debate was already settled. That alone was enough to stun a world that thought it already knew how the story of civilization began. But who, in fact, is Graham Hancock, and what does he have to say to all of these? The man, Graham Hancock. Graham Hancock began his professional career not as an archaeologist, but as a journalist. He studied sociology at Durham University and graduated with honors in 1973. Afterward, he went into mainstream journalism, writing for major publications such as The Economist and The Sunday Times. His work often focused on economic and political issues in Africa, and he spent a good portion of the 1980s reporting on Ethiopia, famine, and global aid efforts. He also served as the East Africa correspondent for The Economist, covering issues from war zones to humanitarian crises. His early writing had little to do with ancient history or archaeology. His career shifted dramatically in the 1990s. While working on a book about Ethiopia, The Sign and the Seal, 1992, which explored the legend of the Ark of the Covenant, Hancock started questioning accepted historical timelines. That book's commercial success inspired him to explore other mysteries in ancient history that, in his view, mainstream scholars had either overlooked or ignored. By the time he published Fingerprints of the Gods in 1995, Hancock had fully transitioned into the field of alternative history. The book, which quickly became a bestseller, argued that ancient monuments such as the Great Pyramid and the Sphinx might be remnants of a much older and more advanced civilization than historians recognized. It was this publication that firmly established his public persona as a challenger to conventional archaeology. Hancock has never claimed to be an archaeologist, and he frequently reminds audiences of that. Instead, he presents himself as an investigative journalist, using the same skills he applied in war reporting, looking for inconsistencies, following evidence, and questioning authority. He has stated in multiple interviews, including with Joe Rogan and in his own documentaries, that he sees it as his duty to raise uncomfortable questions, especially when they concern humanity's past. Rather than positioning himself as a definitive authority, Hancock often describes himself as a heretic in the academic world, openly critical of what he views as a rigid and dismissive attitude from traditional institutions. As for the backlash, Hancock has addressed it head-on. In public talks, on social media, and in his books, he argues that his critics often misrepresent his work or refuse to engage with the actual evidence. He says the reactions from academia highlight a deeper problem. He claims that there is a gatekeeping culture that stifles alternative viewpoints. He's been especially vocal about the pushback his Ancient Apocalypse series received, stating that the strong negative response from scholars only amplified public interest. While critics continue to challenge his conclusions, Hancock maintains that his goal isn't to replace mainstream history, but to expand the conversation. Do you think it's a good idea to further probe Hancock's theories? Let us know your thoughts on the comments. And if you enjoyed this video, do well to subscribe, like and share for more intriguing contents like this. We'll see you in the next video.